Good evening, everyone. We have virtually traveled all over the country and have covered all 4 zones. And today's event is a culmination. I welcome you all on behalf of the organizing committee to Radon Conclave National Meet, organized by Vivekanand Health Mission Trust. So the first event is the best paper competition. I request Mr. Ravinder to please put up the rules. So first of all, I would like to introduce the judges, the esteemed judges. We have Dr. Kishore Singh. Sir is Director and Professor in Radiation Oncology Department at MAMC, New Delhi. We have Dr. Sushmita Gosal. Ma'am is Professor and Head Radiation Oncology Department at PGIMER, Chandigarh. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. C.S. Madhu. He is Senior Consultant and Head of Department in Radiation Oncology Department at Lourdes Hospital in Cochin. Welcome to you, sir. And Dr. Aarti Sareen, Command Medical Officer in Southern Naval Command, Kochi. Welcome to you, ma'am. I welcome all the esteemed judges, and with the permission, we begin with the competition. So the rules are, all the candidates have to introduce themselves first. The camera and audio must be on during your presentation. Please mute yourself while other presentations are on so that it does not cause any disturbance. Each candidate has 4 minutes for presentation, and there will be 2 minutes for discussion. So this is the point I want to emphasize. All candidates are requested to limit themselves in the time limit of 4 minutes, and the discussion should be brief and crisp of 2 minutes. The judges will evaluate you on the basis of your presentation and discussion. The decision of the judges and the organizing committee will be final. There will be negative marking if you exceed your time of presentation, which again, I repeat, is 4 minutes. And we will have a warning message at 3 minutes. So I would like to invite the first candidate, code 01, Dr. Himanshi Khattar.
Good evening, sir.
Go ahead.
A very good evening to one and all. I'm Dr. Himanshi, Junior Resident from SRMS IMS. The topic of my presentation is dosimetric analysis and clinical correlation of brachial plexus in head and neck cancer treated with intensity modulated radiotherapy, that is IMRT. Next, please. The aim of my study is to assess the dosimetric parameters of brachial plexus in head and neck cancer patients treated with concurrent chemoradiation by IMRT technique. Next, please. The objectives of my study are to evaluate clinically for neurological signs and symptoms and radiological evaluation by MRI for neurological changes. Next, please. To assess the dosimetric parameters, to clinically evaluate brachial plexopathy by NCV test pre and post treatment, to correlate the dosimetric parameter with clinical and neurological changes. Next, please. Material and methods. For the present study, untreated 40 patients of head and neck malignancies were selected. Next. The inclusion criteria included the patient with histologically proven squamous cell carcinoma of head and neck cancer, stage 1 to 4A, age more than 18 years, KPS 70, normal blood parameters, and normal 2D echo. Next, please. Patients with prior or synchronous malignancy, previously irradiated, stage 4B, and with comorbid conditions like diabetes, hypertension, thyroid, and peripheral neuropathy was excluded from my study. Next, please. The pre-treatment evaluation was done following the institutional protocol. The two added investigations were MRI neck and a baseline nerve conduction velocity test to see for any brachial plexus damage before starting the radiation. Next, please. All patients were planned and they were delivered a standard definitive dose of 70 grain 35 fractions and 60 grain 30 fractions along with concurrent cisplatin. Next, please. Next slide, please. The brachial plexus was delineated using a head and neck CT scan with 350 Hounsfield unit width. Next, please. This is a video showing the contouring of the brachial plexus in head and neck in the axial sections, and these are the sagittal and the coronal view of the brachial plexus. The guidelines followed were was of Hall et al. And the D'Amico et al. Next, please. Next slide, please. The other OAs were delineated following the Dhanka guidelines. Next slide. The GTV, CTV, and PTV were delineated. Here I want to highlight that the PTV area overlaps the area of the brachial plexus. Next, please. Next slide, please. The follow-up was done following the institutional protocols. The nerve conduction velocity test and MRI was repeated after 6 months of the treatment and was compared with the previous scan to see for any brachial plexus toxicity. Next, please. These are the graphs showing the doses received by the brachial plexus of the individual patient. This is the V40. Next. V45. Next. V50 next. V54 next. V60 next. V66 next. V70. Here I want to highlight that as the dose is increasing, the volume received by the brachial plexus is decreasing, and in certain cases, there are nasopharynx and oropharynx. About 70 gray is going to the brachial plexus. Next. This is the OAR dosimetry, which was within the normal limit. Next. NCV comparison test for pre and post treatment. Next. The highlighted are the significant values for various nerves. Hence, there was a brachial plexus damage after radiation. Next. This is an MRI comparison of pre and post RT treatment. These are the parameters used to assess the brachial plexus toxicity. Next. All the P values of these parameters next were highly significant. Next. This is the clinical assessment we did for the brachial plexus toxicity. This is a patient having difficulty in unscrewing the bottle. Next. This is a patient showing problem in doing the raising above the hand maneuver. And these are the other parameters of proximal arm weakness. Next. These all parameters were found to be highly significant. Next. The sensory parameters were also found to be highly significant. Next. Finally, to conclude, next. Brachial plexopathy is one of the late complications in head and neck cancer, which is not clinically assessed or detected. Therefore, brachial plexus must be considered as an OAR in the contouring of head and neck cancer. Further studies with longer follow-up are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Himanshi. I now request the judges to begin the discussion.
Dr. Himanshi and Dr. Sushmita, I would like to know that if at the time of planning, you saw that the brachial plexus is getting a considerable amount of radiation, why did you insist on going on with the IMRT? Why did you not abandon the plan?
I'm very sorry, ma'am. Why did I do? I was
not clear. If you are seeing right away at the beginning,
yes, ma'am,
the dose to the brachial plexus is significantly high, why did you insist on continuing the treatment?
Ma'am, brachial plexus is still not included as a potential OAR in head and neck. Ma'am, this is the aim of my study.
Did you do this as a prospective study or a retrospective?
Ma'am, it was a prospective study, ma'am.
So in a prospective study, you are seeing that the dose is being, you were finding out the brachial plexus and the dose, you have done it.
Yes, ma'am. I've seen how much dose is going to the brachial plexus.
Why did you allow the radiation to go on if the dose to the brachial plexus was so significantly high?
Ma'am, the point is that brachial...
Did you have a cutoff?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have a cutoff as defined by the RTOG and Imami et al. That is of 60 gray. But ma'am, we have to also see that if the dose is going to the brachial plexus, is it giving any clinical impact on the patients?
But you are showing such significant clinical impact.
Ma'am, this is what we got in a study, ma'am. Before that, we were not having this thing. When I prospectively see the patients, now we are getting to know that this kind of impact that is coming on the patients. And further, we will be including this as a clinical practice to give constraints to the brachial plexus.
In the future, when you have a patient where a significant dose is going, will you continue the radiation?
No, not at all, ma'am. We will try to reduce it by giving a good host constraint to the brachial plexus.
Any other questions? Okay, so if we now proceed with the next presentation, code 02, Dr. Ankita Pandey. Dr. Ankita, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please switch on your video.
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, there is some problem with my webcam. It will be on soon.
Okay, please go ahead, Dr. Ankita. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. So my study is institutional-based experience on multi-catheter interstitial HDR brachytherapy in early stage of breast cancer. Next, please. Starting with introduction, over the last decade, we know that the BCS with radiotherapy has become the standard for the treatment of early stage of breast cancer, and this whole breast irradiation is delivered either by teletherapy of 6 MV photon beam with tangential fields to a dose of 45 to 50 gray, and followed by a boost of 10 to 25 gray. And this was given rationale by clinical observation that 67 to 100% of ipsilateral breast recurrences are originated in the vicinity of the original disease. So there are three randomized trials that have confirmed the boost dose of 10 to 16 gray after 50 gray whole-based irradiation significantly decreases the local recurrence. Next, please. So aim of the study was the prospective analysis to report the response of HDR brachytherapy boost for breast cancer patient in with BCS and radiotherapy in our department. So we included from 2017 to 2020, 23 patients of early stage breast cancer received the breast conserving surgery followed by whole breast irradiation and tumor bed boost by multi-catheter interstitial brachytherapy. Next, please. The mean age was 40 years and maximum number of patients were premenopausal. All the patients were of infiltrative ductal carcinoma, maximum more than 50% were of grade 2. The clinical stage, most common was stage 2 with 70% of patient, and pathological stage of stage 2 was seen in 90% of the patient. All the patients were had surgical margins negative. Neoadjuvant chemotherapy was given in 26% of the patient. All the patients received lumpectomy with axial lymph node resection, except one patient where lumpectomy alone was done. The EBRT was delivered either by teriparatide in 2 patients, or 3D-CRT or IMRT or BMAT to a dose of 40 gray in 15 fraction, followed by brachytherapy boost of 14 gray in 4 fraction. Next, please. So there was a mean gap of 20 days between EBRT and brachytherapy with a range of 4 to 67 days. The number of planes that we used was either 1 plane, 2 or 3 plane. The number of needle, mean was 10 needles with a range of 6 to 14 needles were used to cover the tumor bed. There is a diagram. This is a figure image showing that we placed the needles either by freehand technique or template-based technique. And then the CTV was contoured with a tumor bed with a 1 centimeter margin. Next, please. After that, the catheter reconstruction was done, and then isodose curve was analyzed. Next, please. And all the patients were graded according to toxicity grading of acute and late toxicity was done. Next, please. So acute and late toxicity was done according to CTCAE version 3. The acute skin toxicity after EBRT was of grade 1 seen in 65% of patients. One patient had grade 2 of dysphagia. None of the patient experienced hematologic.
Ankita, 1 minute left.
Acute toxicity after brachytherapy maximum was seen of grade 2. The cosmetic outcome, which we see, was excellent, seen in 17% patient, and 52% patient had good cosmetic outcome. Skin induration of grade 2 was seen in 14 patient. Next, please. So there was a 2 recurrence in 1 patient with 1 patient died due to non-breast related disease. Next, please. So this is an image showing cosmetic outcome before and after radiotherapy. Next, please. Next, please. So there are 3 trials of EORTC, LEON and HNI, which show that the tumor bed boost decreases local recurrence. Next, please. To conclude, fractionated HDR brachytherapy using multi-catheter interstitial implant that provides excellent local tumor control with grade 2 toxicity. So our dose of 14 gray 4 fraction provides a convenient method to deliver the brachytherapy boost. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita. The floor is open for discussion.
Ankita, how did you choose your dose fraction?
Ma'am, for EBRT, we have choose a dose of with a start beat trial of 40 gray in 15 fraction, and then for brachytherapy, there were one of the study previously which was done in our department was of 12 gray in 4 fraction. So we have just increased the dose to compare it both these doses in separate study. So we have increased the dose in this our study 14 gray in 4 fraction.
Any other questions? Okay, so we now proceed to the third candidate, code 03, Dr. Neha Lal, code 03. Dr. Neha, are you there? Dr. Neha?
Hello, yes, sir, I'm here.
All right, please begin.
Very good afternoon, everyone. My topic for today's presentation is interstitial high dose rate brachytherapy as monotherapy in localized prostate cancer treatment. It's a case report. Next slide, please. So clinically, localized prostate cancer, it has been found that HDR brachytherapy is safe and effective as a monotherapeutic modality. PSA relapse-free survival rates are comparable with permanent LDR brachytherapy, EBRT, or radical prostatectomy in case of localized prostate cancer. And our case was of localized prostate cancer, which was treated by HDR brachytherapy as a monotherapy with a hyperfractionated implant treatment regimen. Next slide. So history and examination, 74-year-old gentleman came with a comorbidity of hypertension and diabetes mellitus for last 20 years, was presented with a raised PSA level and a lower urinary tract symptoms in terms of hesitancy and increased frequency. After the detailed general clinical evaluation and distal rectal examination, it was found that the prostate was enlarged and there was a firmness which was palpable and it was non-tender. On MRI, an oval nodule was present in the right anterior transitional zone and in the mid of the gland, and which was reported as a PIRADS 4. Trust-guided biopsy was done, and it was found that it is adenocarcinoma with Gleason score of 7, grade group 2, and out of the 15 cores, 5 were positive, with 4% of the tissue which was involved. Periprostatic invasion was not present, and seminal vesicle and lymphovascular invasion and any perineural invasion was not present. We also went with PSMA PET CT scan. It was found that the disease was localized, only mildly every lesion was present within the prostate gland without any metastatic foci. Next slide, please. So the treatment plan was after coming to the diagnosis was carcinoma prostate of clinically T2A N0M0, and patient was categorized into intermediate risk group. Patient received in neoadjuvant injection leuprolide and bicalutamide for 3 months, and then we proceeded with the interstitial HDR brachytherapy implant in 36 grain 4 fraction, followed by injection leuprolide intramuscularly 22.5 milligram for next 6 months. Next slide, please. So the treatment workflow, under the patient was taken under the spinal anesthesia into the lithotomy position. Foley's catheterization was done. Muppet template was secured to the perineum, and using truss guidance, ultrasonic guidance, 13 interstitial needles were inserted to the Muppet. CT simulation was done using 3 mm slices, and planning and optimization was done. Dose was delivered 36 grain 4 fraction to prostate only using 30 channel microselectron HDR remote after loading brachytherapy unit with iridium 192 source. Next slide, please. This image over here shows the A shows over here the cross section.
We have 1 minute left.
Prostate contour, prostatic urethra, and bladder and the rectum, and it shows the dose sources position, whereas B and C shows the isodose color wash, where yellow represent 100% isodose and blue represent 20% isodose. Next slide, please. The dose which was received by the rectum 2 cc was 75%. CTV received D90 was 103%. Bladder 2 cc was 78%, and urethra 0.1 cc was 159%. CTV V150 and V200 was 33 and 14% respectively. Next slide, please. There was only low-grade acute genitourinary toxicity which was observed, and at present, after 19 months of completion of treatment, patient is having currently no localized disease, and the PSA level is less than 0.0093 nanogram per ml. Next slide. The high dose rate brachytherapy as a monotherapy in localized prostate cancer seems to be well tolerated and effective option for delivering proper treatment dose to the prostate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. I request the judges to ask questions. Are there any questions from the judges? If there are no questions, then we can proceed to the next candidate.
Thank you so much, sir.
The next candidate, code 04, Dr. Swati Virmani, code 04.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Swati Virmani, third year resident, Action Cancer Hospital, Delhi. I'll be presenting on determinants of weight loss in head and neck cancer patients during radiotherapy and Indian tertiary hospital experience. Next slide. As we all know, radiotherapy is an important modality in the treatment of head and neck cancer, and weight loss is commonly observed during this treatment, which may be either due to tumor or treatment-related factors. And consequences of weight loss during treatment may include increased risk of skin reactions, mucositis, hospitalization, interruption of treatment leading to reduced survival and poor quality of life. So identifying patients who are at greater risk of malnutrition is essential to optimize the treatment outcomes. Next slide. This retrospective observational study includes 80 patients with head and neck cancer treated either with concurrent chemoradiation or post-operative radiotherapy. A dose of 70 gray was given in concurrent chemoradiation schedule, while 60 gray was given in post-operative RT. Karnofsky performance score of all the patients were recorded at the beginning of the treatment, and weekly review was done along with hemogram and biochemistry profile. Weight loss of more than 5% of the initial baseline was considered significant. Next slide. The mean age of patient cohort was 61 years with male is to female ratio of 5.6:1. The 60% patients had a weight loss of more than 5% with mean weight loss of 4 kgs. Majority of the patients were of locally advanced stage, with stage 3 comprising 25% and stage 4A comprising 53.1% respectively. 38.4% patients were of oral cavity treated with post-operative RT, while around 54% were of oropharynx, hypopharynx, and larynx treated with concurrent chemoradiation. Next slide. Now coming to individual parameters, use of chemotherapy. 50% of the patient who had more than 5% weight loss received chemotherapy as compared to 10% who did not receive chemotherapy, and it came out to be statistically significant with a p-value of less than 0.001. Dose: 40% of the patients who had more than 5% weight loss had received a higher dose of 70 gray as compared to 20% who received 60 gray, although it was not statistically significant. Next slide. Now comparing leukopenia with weight loss, the patient who had more than 5% weight loss, they are more likely to experience grade 1, 2, 3 leukopenia as compared to the patients with less than 5% weight loss. Next slide. In terms of KPS score, we found out that the patient who had more than 5% weight loss had a lesser KPS score, mean of around 70, although it was not statistically significant. Age, gender, and stage of cancer were not statistically significant. Next slide. Review of literature. In a study conducted by Beaver et al. In 2001, 32.7% of the patients had a weight loss, and important parameters were tumor site, concurrent chemotherapy, and severe pre-treatment weight loss. In a study conducted by Munshi et al. In 2003, 140 patients were recruited, and 37.1% of the patients had a weight loss, and important parameters were KPS less than 80, combined chemoradiation, and a total dose of more than 60 gray. Next slide. Adequate nutrition and dietary counseling is an important component of treatment in patients with head and neck cancer radiotherapy, and such patients with these factors should be identified prior to treatment itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swati. I request the judges to begin the questions.
Dr. Swati?
Evening, ma'am.
Dr. Swati, I have two questions. The first one was, did you have treatment break in the patients who had more weight loss?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you deal with when you found that the weight loss was more than 5%?
Ma'am, if the weight loss is more than 5%, then a more thorough counseling of the patients needs to be done. And
what do you, in counseling, what did you tell them?
Ma'am, in counseling, we tell them to take frequent small meals, often with a high calorie and a high protein requirement, like beans, nuts, cheese, dairy products, spinach, soya products. And
you put rice tube in all your patients?
Yes.
Feeding tubes were put in all your patients?
No, ma'am, not in all the patients.
Okay, thank you.
Then need for other methods like nasogastric tube and feeding jejunostomy to be discussed.
Have you noticed serum albumin?
No, sir, not in my study.
Okay.
Did you look at the side effects?
Ma'am, if there are increased weight loss, then there are more chances of mucositis and skin reactions, which further leads to increased hospitalization and treatment breaks.
So did you correlate with the various side effects? And if you did IMRT, did you correlate with the sites that are anyway inherently going to cause difficulty in swallowing, which will affect weight loss?
Ma'am, I took the various sites, but I've not compared it site-wise.
Okay.
Thank you, judges. We now move to the next presentation, Code 05, Dr. Diksha Chaturvedi. Dr. Diksha, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, please begin.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Diksha Chaturvedi. I'm a junior resident from Sri Ramamurthy Smarak Institute of Medical Sciences, Bhojipura, Bareilly. I'll be presenting the poster on comparison of hippocampal sparing intensity modulated radiotherapy plans in patients of brain tumors treated by three-dimensional conformal radiotherapy. Next slide, please. Surgery followed by radiotherapy is the standard of care in the treatment of primary brain tumors. Neurocognitive toxicity after radiotherapy is a common phenomenon. The dose to the hippocampus is associated with radiation-induced memory impairment. With newer techniques, IMRT may be able to spare hippocampus better. So the aim of this study is to compare the hippocampal sparing in patients of brain tumors treated by three-dimensional conformal radiotherapy with intensity modulated radiotherapy plans. Next slide, please. Materials and methods that were used were 22 set of patients treated by three-dimensional conformal radiotherapy techniques. IMRT plans were generated for the same sets of patients from November 2019 to April 2021. Hippocampus, along with other organs at risk, were contoured according to the RTOG guidelines. Neurocognitive function tests were done before starting the treatment, 3 months and 6 months post-treatment. Next slide, please. So results were as follows. The doses to organs at risk were similar in both the arms in 3D CRT and IMRT, but in PTV parameters, if we are seeing there are much significant values seen in IMRT values. Next slide, please. So hippocampal doses in three-dimensional conformal radiotherapy plans versus IMRT plans. This is the actual image of the contoured hippocampus, and there was no significant p-value observed in either of the plans. Next slide, please. Neurocognitive function assessment was done using mini-mental scoring examination before the start of the treatment, the 0 months, and at 3 months and 6 months. We see the p-value was not significant, but there was gradual improvement in the cognitive function at 6 months. Next slide, please. So to conclude, whether IMRT is able to preserve the neurocognitive function without compromising the oncological outcome needs to be investigated in a large population study. We may need to spare contralateral hippocampus in order to preserve the neurocognitive functions. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Diksha. The floor is open for discussion.
What was your hippocampal avoidance volume?
Ma'am, it was the hippocampus itself which we had contoured.
No,
according
did you
to
take
RTOG 0933.
number? How many cc's?
Ma'am, the volume, they were contoured all along the MRI scans, axial sections.
So there is a term called hippocampus avoidance volume.
Ma'am,
Did you use that?
no, ma'am, we had not taken avoidance volume. We had actually taken the hippocampus itself. We had not given any avoidance zone to it. We were actually during the hippocampus itself. And we were just comparing how much is the dose being received by the hippocampus when trying to radiate the tumor.
Are you planning to do a follow-up of these patients, a further follow-up of these patients with regard to neurocognitive function?
So right now we had just done for 3 and 6 months. But if there was a larger study group involved, we would have definitely, but our further juniors that will be coming up, they'll be taking up the thesis in a modified version. They'll be going ahead with the same plan. They'll be checking whether is it possible to actually improve the neurocognitive function further by further investigating these patients.
What about your set of patients?
So my set of patients, yes, sir, they are coming on follow-up regularly. Even though some patients, they had completed the 6 monthly follow-up, still when I'm checking them on follow-up, they are showing quite improvement in their neurocognitive function. Though I have not charted them here, but 0, 3 and 6 months they had shown, but on follow-up, yes, they are showing improvement.
Have you analyzed them as per age?
No, ma'am. In my study, I had not analyzed them according to the age, but in general, because the study involved only set of patients that were above 18 years of age group. Not
what was the
that.
highest? What was the oldest age?
Ma'am, it was 71 years.
That's what I'm saying. You need to even look at that when you do a long-term study.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If there aren't any other further questions, we'll proceed to the next candidate. Code 06, Dr. Yaman Patidar.
Yes, sir, I'm here. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please start your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yaman Patidar, a third-year resident at ATR City, Bikaner. Next slide, please. As we all know about breast carcinoma is a leading diagnosed cancer in women and it is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in females. The treatment of breast carcinoma is a multi-modality approach, including surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and hormone therapy. Regarding radiotherapy, it is an integral part of multi-modality approach of breast carcinoma management. Patients who underwent BCS should receive post-operative whole breast radiotherapy, while who were on MRI and have high risk of recurrence like size more than 5 cm, positive or close margin, positive lymph node or inadequate lymph node dissection, post-operative radiation therapy should be performed. Next slide, please. However, in patient P-T2, T3, N1A with adequate axillary dissection and no adverse features such as positive margin, perinodal extension, or LVI, nodal irradiation is still a controversy, as under treatment may cause local recurrence and over treatment may cause side effects like lymphedema, restriction of arm movement, shoulder stiffness, chronic arm mobility. So we must balance the benefits of axillary RT against the risk of adverse effect. Next slide, please. So we took 50 patients divided in each arm, 25 in each arm of non-metastatic biopsy-proven breast cancer who underwent MRI with a stage of T2, P-T2, T3, N1A stage 1 to 3 node positive without perinodal extension. And they were divided in two arms, one arm in which they were axillary irradiation given and in other arm, axillary irradiation were omitted and followed for 24 months. Next slide, please. Results were at the end of RT, there was no significant difference in acute reaction between the arms. Mostly grade 1 or 2 skin reaction were observed. Overall rate of acute reactions were 64% in study arm and 68% in cancer control arm. In most of the acute reactions were settled within the 1 month of end of RT. Regarding lymphedema, increased arm circumference was found in 24% in control arm, 8% in study arm at the end of 1 year. The results were significant, and 32% in control arm and 8% in study arm at the end of 2 years. The results were significant. Next slide, please. Shoulder stiffness. In comparison to study arm, more shoulder stiffness was seen in control arm after follow-up. At the end of 1 year, 36% patient had stiffness and restriction of arm movement in control arm, and it was 20% in study arm. Though arm movement relieved with the physiotherapy, it was still 32% in control arm and 12% in study arm. At the end of 2 years, the results were significant. Next slide, please. Regarding cosmetic appearance, the cosmetic appearance of skin of chest wall and axillary region was similar. We were able to manage good cosmesis in control arm in 23 patients and 19 patients of study arm. Though in axillary radiation, the skin of axilla had skin reactions, while in where it was omitted, it was not. And there is after the end of 1 month, there was no significant changes in the skin reactions. Next slide, please. Regarding pneumonitis, at the end of 12 months, statistically insignificant grade 1 or 2 pneumonitis were experienced by 3 patients in study arm and 2 patients in control arm.
Dr. Yaman, 1 minute left.
Same finding persisted after 2 years. Survival at the end of 2nd year, overall survival is 100% for both arms. However, there was one axillary failure in study arm. There was no local regional or distant metastasis present in control arm. The difference is non-significant. Next slide, please. Thus, we concluded that addition of axillary irradiation in T2, T3, N1A stage without perinodal extension resulted in more adverse effect with comparison to observation without any improvement in survival, and thus aids no survival benefit. However, the sample size was too small and follow-up time was also less, And so a study with higher number of patients and long follow-up will better judge the results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yaman. I request the judges to begin the questions. Are there any questions from the judges?
Here you yourself have stated that there is a problem with regard to the follow-up and also the number of patients.
Yes, sir. The follow-up was just for 24 months. We need more follow-up as overall survival is 100%. So we can't say that they are both equal. However, local control was same. And regarding patient, there was just 50 patients, 25% in each arm. So we have to take more number of patients so we better judge the results.
So your conclusions, we cannot draw any sort of conclusion from your final observation.
Sir, we can conclude 2-year local control, but we can't say overall survival. We can conclude about 2-year local recurrence, but as overall survival is both 100%, we can't say about.
Doctor, you know that in breast cancer, this 2-year follow-up is not
very
at all
small.
of any value.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know it is very small, and so we need at least 5-year follow-up for this.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you.
We now proceed to the next. Can we proceed to the next presentation? Dr. Astha Shah, code 07. Dr. Astha, are you there? Dr. Astha?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Astha Shah. I am presenting the case of a high dose rate brachytherapy boost following external radiotherapy in case of carcinoma external ear. Next slide, please. The carcinoma of external ear is a rare case at presentation, and due to the benefit of the tumor location, radiotherapy combined of external radiotherapy and brachytherapy gives us the advantage of organ preservation and thereby cosmosis. And brachytherapy allows the delivery of very large doses for the eradication of tumor and preserving the nearby OAR. Next slide, please. Herein, we report the case of 89-year-old male who presented to our department with complaint of left-sided earache and presence of some mass in the left ear. There was no any history of any trauma or fever or any discharge. On examination, the disease was confined to left ear itself. There was no neck node or any mass in the right side ear. Biopsy from the mass came out to be well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, and a diagnostic CCT scan was done which had shown a 1.6 centimeter diameter lesion involving the external auditory canal in the cartilaginous part. Next slide, please. The decision was done as per the staging. It was T2N0 carcinoma external ear, and it was decided to treat the patient with EBRT combined with brachytherapy. EBRT was done using 3D CRT by 6 MB photon to a dose of 50 gray in 25 fraction. Cotton soaked in water was used as a bolus during the planning scan, and throughout the delivery of the fractionation, the GTV was contoured, and a margin of 1 centimeter was given to contour the CTV, and the 5 mm margin was given for PTV, and the nearby OR, including the brainstem, cochlea, temporal bone, eyeball, mandible, everything was contoured. Next slide, please. Following this, a gap of 7 days was given, and after that, brachytherapy was planned using iridium 192 source, and 3 gray per fraction was given, and 4 fractions were given, 2 fraction on each day, 6 hours apart. The dental material was used for the brachytherapy for fixation of the applicator, and the spike of the IV set was used in the delivery of the brachytherapy. The V200, V150, V100, and D90 were seen, and the plan was approved and executed. Next slide, please. The figure shows the flexible tube with the mold which was used. Next slide. This is the axial color wash showing the brachytherapy plan. Next slide, please. These are the dose statistics for the brachytherapy. Next slide, please. This is the actual brachytherapy plan execution which was done. The patient was treated in left lateral position. Next slide, please. This is the CT scan showing pre-radiotherapy and post-radiotherapy scan. With the post one shows no evidence of any disease. Next slide, please. Conclusion, the discussion is that the carcinoma of external ear, due to the advantage of the location, can be very well treated by a radical radiotherapy approach in early stages. The combination of brachytherapy with EBRT allows the delivery of very high BED to the tumor, and eradication of the tumor can be
Dr. Asta,
done
1
with
minute left.
Next slide, please. Conclusion, post 1 year, there is no evidence of any disease clinically as well as radiographically, and thus we conclude that EBRT combined with brachytherapy allows is a better modality with less side effects and better cost message. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asta. Judges, please proceed with the questions. Are there any questions from the judges?
What was did you do any hearing assessment?
Yes. Pre-RT, we had sent the patient to the ENT specialist, where pure audiometry and bone conduction tests were done, and after RT completion, we had done the same for the patient.
So 1 year down the line, is there any change?
The patient had initially, he had some difficulty in hearing, but at post 1 year, there is no any difficulty in hearing as reported by the patient, and the results of the.
How much was the dose to the cochlea?
The cochlea dose was kept within the constraint and during the EBRT.
How much is the constraint?
The mean dose to the cochlea was 43 gray, left cochlea.
Okay. And do you think that you could use a better bolus material than gauze?
It was easily available, and we can use it every day. So we preferred this one, cotton soaked in water.
This dental impression compound, did it interfere with the dosimetry in the dosimetry? How did you localize?
No, it was just used to fix the applicator, and the PTV was beyond that, so it did not interfere with the dosimetry.
No. With the dental impression compound, did you take a CT or radiograph to localize the radioactive source in relation to your target volume?
Yes, sir. During the brachytherapy, after the fixation of the IV set, the planning scan was done with the mold itself, and the dummy.
So then it would have produced artifacts.
No, it did not produce any artifact. The figure in the next slide shows that the dental material was used, kept at that time, and did not produce any artifact.
You could have shown that.
So the axial color was has that mold during that time.
Okay, with the permission of the judges, I'll move to the next candidate. Dr. Vansh Arora, code 08. Dr. Vansh, code 08.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Dr. Vansh, go ahead.
Yes, very good evening to all of you. Myself, Dr. Vansh Arora. I happen to be a third-year resident in Acharya Tulsi Cancer Hospital, Bikaner. The topic of my presentation is prediction of brain metastasis in non-small cell carcinoma lung. Now, next slide, please. We all know that 16 to 20% of the cases of lung cancer later on come to brain metastasis. This number is further increased to 50 to 60% in patients who have ALK mutation and EGFR mutation. Next. Now, why I was curious about this study is we have risk stratification score for breast carcinoma. We have IPI score for lymphomas. In fact, in our topic of discussion today, we have Roche formula for prostate cancer as well. We have prophylactic irradiation for small cell carcinoma lung. Then why not for non-small cell carcinoma lung when they acquire such a large part in our ward? Next. Now what I did is very simple. I took 100 patients, those who were undergoing or have underwent palliative cranial RT in our center, and at once had only lung cancer. I wanted to compare the lung cancer, so I divided them on the basis of their gender, on the basis of TNM staging of the lung cancer, on the basis of the side of the lung involved, and on the basis of the lobe of the lung involved. Next. Now, what were my results? 92% of the patients that I took were male patients and 8% were female. Next, now according to the side, right side was most common with over 40%, that is precisely 48%, and left was in 36%. Next, lobe-wise, upper lobe considered, it had 54% of the patient, and lower lobe had 30%. Next, when we divided them on the basis of the TNM staging, the T disease, T3 had 36% cases and T4 had 48% cases. Next, now the nodal wise staging, the N2 had over 50%, 52% to be very precise, and N3 had 18%. Next, now what is my conclusion? I conclude that male patient who had right-sided carcinoma lung, those who had upper lobe carcinoma lung, and had upstage disease such as T3 onwards have more chances to have brain metastasis in their life. Next, I also wanted to see what is the most common site of the brain metastasis, and came to know that frontoparietal region is the most common site for the brain metastasis. But what were the limitations of my study? I had taken less number of patients. Patients were 100 only. I should have taken more patients, and I want to take more patients further. I could have also included genetic study in my study. And of course, I could take other perspective as well, such as age of the patient and the group staging of the patient. What I expected, it is a very long shot to say that I would like to have prophylactic cranial irradiation for such patients. But as a resident, what I can do is I can tell those patients about the neurological signs and symptoms so that they do not sideline common symptoms such as headache as well. Thank you so much. I would like to have questions.
So first of all, did you look at the histology, adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, large cell anaplastic, like that?
Thank you for the question, sir. No, sir. As of this study is considered, I did not take the histology. I was just restricted to non-small cell carcinoma lung. Yes, it could have been included.
What percentage of your patients received chemotherapy?
Sir, as I mentioned, they were on treatment for lung carcinoma treatment. Earlier, they were only lung cancer. Then this come to brain metastasis, and they were receiving chemotherapy. Mostly all the patients were receiving treatment for lung cancer. Later on their life, they got brain metastasis, and then we started on palliative cranial artery to that patient.
Dr. Vansh, I have a very simple question to you. You have a relatively high volume center. How many CL lungs come to your non-small cell lung cancer come to your institute a year?
Ma'am, I would not be so precise because I'm not sure of the number. Yes, ma'am. We have approximately 70 new patients daily in our center, and approximately 30
male to female ratio.
Ma'am, of course, male are the most common to have lung cancer.
And the next thing is, how many of them eventually get brain metastasis?
Yes, ma'am. That is point. I took 1 year. This 100 patients were within the 1 year, and we had all.
You said you have taken only patients who've had brain metastasis.
Yes, yes.
My question is, how many of your lung cancer patients, non-small cell lung cancer patients, ultimately have brain metastasis?
Ma'am, I would not be right if I say about my center, but theoretically, as I mentioned,
no, you are working at a center for some time.
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You propose to say that male patients with which side, right side, they have higher, and then you want to give them prophylactic brain radiation. You should be very confident about what you are talking, sir.
Yes, sure, ma'am. I would not able to answer how many percent of the patient ultimately go.
I can see this before you start prophylactic radiating them.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
What was one more question?
All right.
I'm just trying to understand the aim once again.
Ma'am, I wanted to know which primary, the site and the TNM staging. We all know that 16 to 20% ultimately go to the brain metastasis. In that 20%, is there any pattern where I could predict that T3 or T4 patient is more common to have brain metastasis than the previous one, or the age or the gender of the patient that is more prone to have cranial metastasis than the others? In that 20%, I want to decode some set of patients.
How many of your patients had other metastasis, liver metastasis, bone metastasis, etc.?
Sir, I included only single brain metastasis in my study. I did not include any patient who had other metastasis.
No. Brain metastasis patients, we know that many of them will have concurrent metastasis in other sites.
Yes, sure, sir. But I restricted my study to only single brain metastasis and with primary lung. Yes, there were many patients when I was studying which had adrenal or liver mets other than the brain mets, but I did not include them in my study.
We now proceed to the next presentation. Code 09, Dr. Beena Sen. Dr. Beena, are you there? Dr. Beena Sen.
Dr. Beena, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir. My topic is dosimetric analysis of brachial plexus in breast cancer patient treated with post-mastectomy radiotherapy to the ipsilateral supraclavicular area by 3-dimensional conformational radiotherapy. Next slide, please. Introduction. Breast cancer is the most common malignancy among female in India. Post-mastectomy radiotherapy improves the local control and survival. There is 4 to 8% chances of recurrence in the ipsilateral supraclavicular area. Therefore, along with the chest wall irradiation and axillary irradiation, ipsilateral supraclavicular area also irradiated. Brachial plexus formed by the ventral rami of cervical C5 to C8 and thoracic T1 now roots. The brachial plexus may be considered as an organ at risk as it extends in the ipsilateral supraclavicular area. Radiation-induced brachial plexus neuropathy may occur if exposed to the higher dose. Next slide, please. Methods. 30 breast cancer patients who were undergone mastectomy were selected and planned for the 3-dimensional conformal radiotherapy. The age of the patients between 35 to 55 years who registered between December 2019 to April 2021. All patients were immobilized using thermoplastic mold and simulation done, and contrast CT scan with 5 mm slice thickness were taken. According to ICRU report 50 and 62, the surgical bed and the clinical target volume and planning target volume were pointed. The objective were to cover 95% of PTV with 95% of the prescribed dose and not more than 1% of PTV receiving more than 110% of the prescribed dose. There were no dose constraints applied for the brachial plexus. Next slide, please. The brachial plexus were contoured according to RTOZ guideline. The vertebral bodies C4 to C5 and T1 were identified, and the brachial plexus contour started from the neural foramina from C5 to T1 using the 5 mm diameter brush tool. Where no neural foramina is seen, the space between the anterior and the medial scalene muscles were contoured, and 40.05 gray dose, 2.67 gray per fraction were given by 3-dimensional conformal radiotherapy on the linear accelerator with using 6 MV X-ray. Next slide, please. This is the brachial plexus which I have contoured, and this is the left side of the brachial plexus, patient having left side of the breast cancer, and this is the dose volume histogram of the brachial plexus. Next slide, please. Result. The mean of the maximum brachial plexus dose was 41.98 gray on the ipsilateral side, and the mean of the brachial plexus volume was 10.66 cc. Next slide, please. The number of patients, less than 40 gray patients, about 10% of the patients receiving less than 40 gray on the brachial plexus, and around
Beena,
40,
1 minute left.
83%, 40 to 45 gray between, and more than 45 gray receiving in around 6% of the patients, and N2 category patients are about 90%, and N0 to N1 are about 10%. Next slide, please. The discussion part, the analysis suggests that there is a variability in the dose received by the brachial plexus and the higher number of lymph node involvement. Patients were received more dose at brachial plexus. However, clinically, no sign and symptoms of the brachial plexus were plexopathy were found at the median follow-up 10 months. Next slide, please. Limitations of the MY study. There is a difficulty to identify brachial plexus CT in city-based planning and no standard guideline for the radiation-induced brachial plexopathy. And to develop radiation-induced brachial plexus, that may be take longer time. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beena. The floor is open for discussion. Are there any questions from the judges?
Are you planning to do a longer follow-up of these patients?
Yes, sir.
See what is.
Yes, sir. Sir, one of the study has done international study from the China. They have taken around 5 years durations, and they got in 3 patients. They have they found radiation-induced brachial plexopathy.
All right. We now proceed to the next presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Code 10, Dr. Prem Kumar. Dr. Prem, are you there?
Hello. I am audible, sir.
Yes, you are. Please begin.
Sir, good evening to all. My subject is comparative study between 3 weekly CTRT versus weekly CTRT for patients with locally advanced head and neck cancer. Next slide, please. Introduction. Head and neck cancer are the second most common cancer in India and most common in Indian males. These cancers account for third most common cancer causing death in India. The treatment of head and neck cancer is a multimodality approach, including surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy. First-line treatment of these head and neck cancer is surgery. High risk factor like positive margins and positive extranodal extension require CTRT. Next slide, please. Objectives. To compare disease response and toxicity profile at 3 and 6 month overall survival, loco-regional recurrence, along with acute and chronic effect of 3 weekly CTRT, in which cisplatin dose is 100 mg per meter square versus weekly CTRT, in which cisplatin dose is 30 mg per meter square. Material and method. Total patient taken 50, and in arm A, 3 weekly CTRT 25%, and arm B, weekly CTRT 25%, then taken follow-up. Next slide, please. Results. There is no significant difference in disease response, overall survival, loco-regional recurrence between 2 arms. However, 3 weekly CTRT resulted in increased rate of acute kidney injury, which is 36% versus 20%. Rate of ototoxicity was same. Nausea and vomiting was more frequent and troublesome in 3 weekly arms. Toxicity like mucositis had no difference. However, rate of neutropenia, xerostomia were higher in 3 weekly arm, but statistically non-significant. Next slide, please. This is the study. In arm A, overall survival for 6 months, arm B and arm A and arm B is equal. Loco-regional recurrence is slightly high in arm B. Nephrotoxicity is more in arm A, and ototoxicity is equal, and neutropenia is more in arm A, and xerostomia is slightly more in arm A. Next slide, please. This is graphical representation. Next slide, please. Conclusion. Disease response at the end of 6 months was same in 3 weekly and weekly CTRT. However, nephrotoxicity was high in 3 weekly cisplatin. So patients who are at risk of kidney disease can avoid 3 weekly CTRT. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prem. I request the judges to begin the questions.
Did you exclude any patients due to nephrotoxicity? Did any patients drop out of your study?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the total dose of cisplatin in weekly arm?
Weekly arm, sir, mainly 30 mg per meter square, and we can increase it 40 mg per meter square.
How many cycles?
According to RT, about 4 to 5 cycles we can give.
That means it is still below 200 mg total dose, which is the minimum required for radiosensitization.
Yes, sir.
And how did you hydrate the patient in 3 weekly schedule?
Pardon, sir?
How did you hydrate the patient? How many IV fluids you used during 3 weekly schedule?
Before planning weekly or 3 weekly CTRT, we advise patient in any every follow-up to hydrate properly, to take oral intakes, and during chemotherapy, we hydrate patient about 3 liter fluid.
3 liter?
Approximately, sir, 3 liter.
Okay, okay.
So the thing is, with regard to your once in 3 week dose of 100 milligram per meter square. Now, did you administer it in a single day or did you fractionate it?
Sir, according to patient condition and according to her RFT evaluation, we can administer on single day, but mostly we prefer day 1, day 2 CT.
Day 1, day 2.
Yes, sir.
You didn't give it over day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Didn't you do that? But your weekly dose, 30 milligram per meter square, is on the lower side.
Yes, sir.
So that means it is not a comparable arm.
Yes, sir.
Are there any further questions from the judges? All right. We now proceed to the next presentation. Number 11, Dr. Nofira V.S.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, please begin.
My presentation is prospective observational study of preoperative short course radiation followed by delayed surgery in locally advanced adenocarcinoma of rectum. Next slide. Locally advanced carcinoma of rectum is managed through multimodality approach, as the same result of the preoperative long course radiation therapy can be achieved through short course radiation therapy followed by a delayed surgery. It would be ideal for the centers with high patient load which only need a shorter duration of treatment. Next slide. Next slide. Aims of the study is to assess the immediate clinical outcome. Objective is to assess the tumor response at 6 weeks after radiotherapy and postoperatively to assess the acute toxicity. Next. Metilsem method, it is a prospective observational study conducted in Regional Cancer Center, Trivandrum. 22 patients were selected and who had study period was January 2019 to March 2020. Inclusion criteria include age less than 70 years, eco performance score 2, biopsy proven adenocarcinoma of rectum, MRI defined T3 node positive disease with or without involvement of CRM. Next slide. Exclusion criteria, tumors located less than 4 cm from anal verge and presence of metastasis, hereditary polyposis excluded. Next slide. A method, this study was approved by Institutional Research Board, written informed consent was obtained by the patients. Pre-treatment MRI was mandatory. RT planning was done using a CT simulator in supine position, 2.5 mm slice. IV contrast was used and contouring was done as per RTOG contouring guideline. Dose was 25 gray in 5 fraction at 5 gray per fraction for 5 days. 3D CRT using Eclipse version 15.6 were delivered by using high energy linac. Next. Reassessment MRI was taken at 6 weeks after completion of RT. Same radiologists were reduced. Same radiologists for reduction in inter-observer variation. Modified RECIST criteria and MRTRG criteria were used for radiological response, and pathological response assessment was also done by the same pathologist. Pathologically modified Ryan TRG group regression was used. Statistical analysis was done by SPSS version 11.0. Next. Baseline patient characteristics, most of the patients were males and smoking was common. Median age was 58 years. Most common symptoms were bleeding per rectum. Next. Location of the tumor, most of the tumors were in midrectal and most of the patients had CRM involvement. Most of the stages were CT3N1 and CT3N2. CT3N2 are common and the stage is defined in MRI. Next slide. 22 patients were selected, and 19 patients had an R0 resection, and rest of the other patient, one patient had an R2 resection because of he had peritoneal metastasis, and one patient had inoperable disease, and another patient denied further surgical procedure due to personal reason. Next slide. Radiological response assessment, the most common response was 72 partial response and was seen in 72.7%. And MRTRG most common is grade 3, which was seen in 54.5%. Next slide. Pathological response, 20 patients had detailed pathological examination, and one patient had complete pathological response. 25 patients had high-risk features of LVS and
Dr.
PNI. Next
Mafira,
slide.
1 minute left.
Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Toxicity CTCA version 5.0 was used at 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and after radiotherapy. After 2 weeks, no grade 4 toxicity was seen, and after during admission, only grade 1 toxicity. After surgery, no grade 4 toxicity. Only 15 patients had grade 3 toxicity. Next slide. By statistical analysis, we have concluded that CEA and the extracapsulation has significant impact on the radiological response assessment. Next slide. The agreement. Next slide. The agreement between the MRTRG and RIAN-TRG was sensitivity 76%, specificity 33.3%. Next slide. Compared to our study, the landmark trial, the Stockholm 3 trial, we compared all our conclusion results with Stockholm trial,
Dr.
and we have
Mafira's
concluded
time
that.
is over.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I request the judges to begin the questions.
In your study, did you give any neoadjuvant chemoradiation before this?
No, sir.
Neoadjuvant chemotherapy?
No, sir.
Are you doing this trial for your primarily operable carcinoma rectum?
Yes, sir. Primary operable, locally advanced carcinoma of rectum.
No. Early carcinoma. Early carcinoma of the rectum. Do you do this?
We took T3 onwards, T3 node positive disease with or without involvement of CRM. Those patients are only included. MRI defined.
So you mentioned about one patient who denied further treatment. What was the status of the disease in his case?
She also had CT3 disease and she had good regression, but she discontinued surgical treatment because of her personal reasons only. And she went to some other hospital for further treatment due to logistic issues.
Did you compare the side effects of your treatment with the previous studies that have been put, like the Stockholm trial, which they were assessed much earlier, right? You've taken a 6-week gap, which is the trend now. But did you compare your side effects with the figures of previous trials?
Yeah, we compared the toxicity data with Stockholm 3 trial. That was 7% in the post radiotherapy acute complication was around 7%, and we had only 4.5%. And similarly, hospital admission was around 10%. In our study also, hospital study was much less, 5% only after surgery.
Okay, and your tumor regression in studies in literature, which would have assessed earlier, immediately after surgery, to what yours are? Is there any change? Is there any better response?
Yeah, madam, most of the studies, they have reported in using Dwarak TRG criteria, other AJCC TRG criteria. I could not find any rectal studies which have specifically used modified RIAN TRG. Some study have evaluated in retrospective study only. No prospective study, I could not find such prospective study.
Okay, good.
Thank you, judges. We now move to the next presentation, number 12, Dr. Sheena Joy.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Sheena, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Sheena, Junior Resident in Caritas Hospital, Kottayam. My study is on bone marrow sparing radiotherapy in locally advanced rectal cancer. Next slide. Aim of my study was to assess whether the bone marrow sparing radiotherapy using VMAT will reduce acute hematological toxicity, and the primary objective is to compare toxicity between the two groups, bone marrow sparing and non-bone marrow sparing arm. Other objective were to do dosimetry comparison and to determine in practice predictive of hematological toxicity while maintaining similar tumor response. Next slide. It was a single institution prospective randomized control study where patients received 50.4 G in 28 fractions, 5 fractions per week, along with oral capecitabine 825 milligram per meter square twice a day on the days of RT. 43 patients were included. They were randomized into 2 arms by block randomization method. Arm A receiving bone marrow sparing VMAT with the dose constraints of V5 less than 95, V10 less than 85, V20 less than 80, V30 less than 65, V40 less than 45. And arm B with no bone marrow constraint. Next slide. The bone marrow contouring was done in 2 sets. Whole bone bowling, that is 3 cm above the upper border of the PTB and 3 cm below the lower border of the PTB. And freehand cavity bowling created in LS spine from L5 and including lower pelvis, the low density regions inside the bone. Next slide. Patients were assessed before RT, weekly during RT, and in the first week, 6th week, and 3rd month after RT for toxicities. They were graded using RTOG, acute radiation morbidity grading criteria. Grade 2 or more anemia, leukopenia, neutropenia, thrombocytopenia, any blood transfusion, colony stimulating factor infusion, or platelet transfusion were considered as an event in acute hematological toxicity. Next slide. In the result, 21 patients were in the bone marrow sparing arm. In that, 14 patients in the pre-op and 7 patients in the post-op group. 22 patients in the non-bone marrow sparing arm. In that, 70 patients in the pre-op and 5 patients in the post-op group. Next slide. Comparison of acute hematological toxicity between the arms. In the whole study group, 17% reduction in the total hematological toxicity and 22% of reduction in the grade 2 or more anemia was noted in the bone marrow sparing arm, but the differences were not statistically significant. Next slide. So next we analyzed toxicities in patients received preoperative chemoradiotherapy separately, and we found out that the difference was more pronounced. That is 31.5% reduction in the total hematological toxicity, and grade 2 or more anemia was significantly less in the bone marrow sparing arm with a p-value less than 0.05. When analyzed, if the patient received postoperative chemoradiotherapy, there were no significant difference in the occurrence of hematological toxicity between the 2 arms. Next slide. Then is the comparison of other acute toxicities. Grade 2 or more gastrointestinal, genitourinary, and skin toxicity were similar between the arms. Next slide. Coming to the dosimetric comparison between the arms, first is the dose to the bone marrow whole bone. Here the box plot diagram showing statistically low values of whole bone V5, V10, V20, V30, and V40 in the bone marrow sparing arm when compared to the non-bone marrow sparing arm. Next is the dose to the next slide. Next is the dose to the bone marrow freehand. Here FH, V5, V10, V20, V30, and V40 were reduced significantly in the bone marrow sparing arm when compared to the non-bone marrow sparing arm. Next slide. Next is the dose to the other
1 minute left.
Small intestine and bladder. The dose received were similar in both arms. Next slide. Coming to the predictors of hematological toxicity, we analyzed variables like age, sex, timing of chemoradiotherapy, chemotherapy received or not, stage, group, dosimetric parameters of whole bone and freehand. Here only female sex came as a predictor of hematological toxicity. Next slide. The mean dose received with the whole bone and freehand in patients with or without hematological toxicity is similar in between the 2 arms. Coming next. Response to the pre-op chemoradiotherapy was similar in both arms, and significant downstaging has happened in patients receiving pre-op chemoradiotherapy. Next slide. Conclusion. Recent studies have shown that pelvic bone marrow V5 less than 95, V10 less than 90, V20 less than 75, V40 less than 28 can result in significant reduction in hematological toxicity. Our study has shown that bone marrow sparing VMAT can achieve much lower doses. In our study, we could reduce hematological toxicity using this technique by 17%, though not statistically significant. And hence, we propose that pelvic bone marrow sparing RT may be beneficial for patients with locally advanced carcinoma rectum, especially in the preoperative setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheena. Judges, please begin with the questions. Any questions from the judges?
How much time it takes to contour a patient?
For freehand, it takes much time, sir, because we have to separately contour the low density regions in the spine, whole pelvis and lower spine. So it takes much time. More than half hour, I think so, for only for the bone marrow.
Okay.
Did you have any patients whom you gave GCSF to?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. We have given for 3 patients.
And how far into the treatment were there? How many days from starting?
In my study, only 1 patient have a grade 3 leukocytopenia. In that patient, we have given, and another 2 patients had a grade 4, grade 2 leukopenia along with the grade 4 skin toxicities. In that 2 patients we have given. That is towards the end of the treatment, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, judges. Thank you, Dr. Sheena.
Thank you.
We now proceed with the next presentation, number 13, 1-3, Dr. V.S. Premchand.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. I am Dr. V.S. Premchand Kumar Avadi. I will be presenting a case report, mold brachy for CA uvula, radiation oncology simulation to execution. Next slide. It's about a 60-year-old patient who is a smoker, presented with a painful swelling and mass in the upper part of palate with no history of vomitings or any discharge. Diagnosed by local ENT surgeon of a growth of 1.5 to 1.5 centimeters, which is not extended to soft palate. The excisional biopsy report shows as a squamous cell carcinoma, moderately differentiated with margins not commented. Next slide. I have done a neck node evaluation and found that it is a non-specific lymphadenopathy, and my final diagnosis is CA uvula post-excisional biopsy with margins not commented, PT1 M0, and the tumor board plan is brachytherapy mold EQD2 60 grade. Next slide. I have placed the wires with a margin of 5 to 10 mm around the CTV. Next slide. I have done the grooving on the ventral surface of the mold with the catheters and filled the earbud with a junction violet and marked the target area. That is a uvula, and fixed the copper wire around the mouth. Next slide, please. This is the picture showing the IOP in the patient's mouth. Next slide, please. I have separated the posterior pharyngeal wall by Ryle's tube to prevent the dose to the posterior pharyngeal wall. Next slide, please. I have done a planning CT with 1 mm slice in supine position with a mold in the mouth from vertex to clavicle, multiplanar, and the catheters are numbered. Next slide, please. After a catheter reconstruction, I have targeted the GTV and CTV, and as it is a brachy, there is no need of PTV. Next slide, please. The dose selection is 4 gray, twice daily, 13 to 14 fractions, and for with alpha beta of 10 to a EQDT of around 60.67 gray. Next slide, please. The treatment gap between the two fractions should be around 6-hour interval. That is a time required to allow complete repair of the sublethal damage. Next slide, please. After the cathetering, numbering, and marking, I have planned by using a IPSA algorithm, optimized graphically, and the treatment calculation is done, and the plan is executed. Next slide, please. By using the Jacastro-Acrop recommendations for head and neck brachytherapy of squamous cell carcinoma, I have done the target dose evaluation. Next slide, please. According to this, the DNR should be equal to or lower than the 0.36, and the CTV coverage is adequate if D90 is at least 90% of the prescribed dose. Next slide, please. This slide shows about the isodose in all planes. Blue represents 85%, red 100%, orange 150%, white 200%, green 300%. Next dose slide. The OAR which are evaluated are posterior pharyngeal wall and base of tongue. Next slide, please. The target dose evaluation, the coverage index, the CTV volume which I got is 0.32 cc, and D90 is 98.34%, which is of a desirable range. V150 is 34.
1 minute left.
94.04%. B200 is 8.94%. Next slide, please. This is how I treated, and how, with the help of the how I separated the base of the tongue with using a wax bolus. Next slide, please. This is the treatment question, and the inter-treatment care is showing the inter-treatment care is mainly the oral hygiene and as well as the analysis if necessary. Next slide, please. The post-treatment care is oral hygiene and controlling the reactions and counseling about the upcoming reactions. The follow-up should be around after 3 months with a local examination, ultrasound neck for notes. Next slide, please. The summary is we should preserve the organ and cure the cancer with the help of a mold brachy, and we should not panic for the reactions, and we should counsel the patient in a proper way with the help of your dentist. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Premchand. The floor is open for discussion. Do the judges have any questions? If there are no questions, then we'll proceed to the next presentation. Thank you, Dr. Premchand. The next presentation, number 14, 1-4.
Good.
Dr. Priyasha, are you there?
Dr. Priyasha, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible? I'm Dr. Priyasha, Junior Resident, Department of Radiotherapy, Mahatma Gandhi Cancer Hospital, Visakhapatnam. I am here to present the procedural details of cancer of the right breast with a single liver metastasis, wherein there is simultaneous treatment of the chest wall with radiotherapy and SBRT for the liver lesion. Next slide, please. Breast cancer, oligometastatic breast cancer is common, and the patients can be treated radically. Here we are reporting a case of a ductal carcinoma of the right breast with a single liver metastasis. Though apparently it looks like a simple procedure, that part of a liver comes in treatment both during the external beam radiation to the chest wall as well as during SBRT liver. Here we present the procedural details. Next slide, please. A 56-year-old female presented with a lump in the upper and outer quadrant of the right breast. On histopathology, it was infiltrative ductal carcinoma, ERPR positive, and HER2 negative. The metastatic workup showed a localized breast lesion with a right axillary node and a segment and a lesion in the liver in segment 6, measuring 17 by 16 mm with an SCV max of 9.3. Next slide, please. The tumor board discussion was to treat the patient with radical intent using neoadjuvant palbociclib followed by modified radical mastectomy and chest wall irradiation and SBRT to the liver lesion. Hormonal therapy with letrozole was chosen. Next slide, please. After completion of the neoadjuvant chemotherapy, there was a good clinical response to the breast, but with a stable liver lesion. The patient then underwent MRM with axillary dissection, and the histopathology was YPT21A-MX. She was then subjected to radiation therapy. Next slide, please. Here we can see the fused image of the pre-chemo PET CT and the post-chemo CT scan. Next slide, please. The hurdles that we encountered was that it was a right-sided breast cancer and the liver receives radiation both during the chest wall irradiation as well as during the SBRT. So we decided to treat the patient using a DIPH technique, deep inspiratory breath hold technique, for both the chest wall and the liver lesions. Next slide, please. The patient was simulated on a VAC log and a triple phase CT of the liver lesion was taken. The lesion was more prominent and enhancing in the arterial phase. The timing of the breath hold was made such that it will coincide with the starting of the arterial phase. Then the planning CT for the right chest wall was taken using DIVH technique using active breath control from mandible to umbilicus. Next slide, please. This is how the patient was simulated. Next slide, please. The target volumes for the chest wall were contoured as per the ISTRO guidelines, and 40 grain 15 fractions were delivered to the chest wall and the SCF using as per the STAR-B protocol. The SBRT for the liver lesion was planned at 15 gray per fraction for 3 fractions to achieve a BED of more than 100 gray. Next slide, please. This is how the target volume is delineated. Next slide, please.
Dr. Priyasha, 1 minute left.
The mean liver dose was calculated and liver minus GTU was calculated. Both the planning CT scans were fused and the cumulative mean liver dose was calculated. As per the TG101 protocol, all the constraints were maintained and the B700cc of the liver was 3 gray and the mean liver dose in the breast plan was 10 gray. Next slide, please. This is the color wash showing the planned fused planning CTs, wherein the liver received dose both during the chest wall as well as the liver irradiation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The patient was treated after CT and CBCT matching. Next slide, please. Statistics show that the incidence of oligometastatic breast cancer is high, and the patient can be treated with the following procedure if the liver constraints are kept in mind. Irradiating the chest wall without DIPH in the liver may get more radiation dose, and unless the both planning CTs are fused, the cumulative dose to the liver cannot be calculated, which is vital. Next slide, please. If we keep in mind all this, then we can treat the liver lesion with along with the right-sided breast lesion simultaneously, and the oligometastatic breast cancers can be treated with a radical intent. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Dr. Priyasha. I request the judges to begin the questions.
So when you have given the hormonal treatment, your tumor cells are predominantly going to be in the G1 phase of the cell cycle. So do you think it will help your radiotherapy, or you believe that SBRT is not bothered about the phase of the cell cycle?
Sir, SBRT, actually we have stopped the hormonal therapy during radiation, sir. But then SBRT does not matter if the phase of the cell cycle does not matter, sir.
So why did you stop?
As far as SBRT,
why did you stop the?
We are also irradiating the breast tissue, sir. We are also irradiating the breast. We are also irradiating the breast chest wall, sir.
So you think that the hormonal therapy
we're using hypofractionation.
So do you think that the hormonal therapy will interfere with your chest wall radiation?
It may not interfere, sir, but we decided to stop it because it was a hypofractionation.
Any reason? Any studies? Any reference?
There's no much data regarding that, sir, whether to continue the hormonal therapy or to give a break. But the medical oncologist at our place was more convinced to stop the hormonal therapy.
Because he doesn't know much about radiotherapy.
Any follow-up on this patient?
The patient was recently treated, ma'am. The patient has come for, will be coming for follow-up after 2 more months.
All right, if there are no further questions, we'll proceed to the next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 15, Dr. Tintu MV.
Good evening, all. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Tintu, go ahead.
Okay. My topic is on preoperative chemoradiation carcinoma esophagus, experience from a tertiary cancer care center in India. Next slide, please. Esophageal cancer is one of the commonest cause of cancer-related death in India, and squamous cell carcinoma is the most common histology. There is an increase in the incidence of adenocarcinoma in recent times. Next slide, please. In 2012, cross-trial showed the benefit of preoperative chemoradiation using weekly paclitaxel with a radiation compared to the surgery alone. PCR rate was 28%, and overall survival was also improved in the combined therapy. Next slide, please. This retrospective study was conducted to determine the response to preoperative chemoradiation in CA esophagus. Next slide, please. AIM's primary objective was to evaluate the rate of pathological complete response, and secondary objective was to determine the recurrence rate and pattern of recurrence. Next slide. Materials and methods. We retrospectively revealed the patients with the locally advanced esophageal cancer and OG junction treated at the hospital from 2018 to 20. Information on the demographic data investigation treatment details were recorded from our hospital database for 50 patients. Next slide. Pre-treatment workup included physical examination, OGDscopy, biopsy, and chest and abdominal CT. After the completion of this preoperative chemotherapy, patients were re-emerged with a CT abdomen and pelvis. Next slide, please. So treatment details, RT was administered using Linacor cobalt-16. Total dose delivered was 41.4 gram, 23 fractions, 1.8 gram per fractions, 5 fractions per week. Next slide, please. Chemotherapy was administered concurrently on the first day of RT. Patients received a concurrent chemotherapy regime of weekly Paclitaxel 50 mg per meter square and carboplatin AUC2 for 5 weeks. Next slide, please. Surgery was scheduled 6 to 8 weeks after the preoperative chemotherapy. Next slide, please. Coming to the result, total of 50 patients were included in the analysis, among where 30 were males and 20 were females. Next slide, please. Median age was 15 years and all patients had an ECOG performance status less than 2. Coming to the histology, 76% belong to the squamous cell carcinoma histology, 24 belong to the adenocarcinoma histology. Next slide, please. Coming to the tumor site, majority belong to the middle third, followed by lower third and OG junction. Next slide, please. Next, coming to the grade, majority belong to poorly differentiated grade, followed by moderately differentiated, and only 6 patients belong to well differentiated grade. Next slide, please. Coming to the RT technique, most of the patients are treated by the cobalt-16. Next slide, please. After receiving the preoperative chemoradiation, 2 patients were progressed on treatment. That patients were censored at the time of analysis. Remaining 48 patients underwent surgery, and all patients achieved an R0 resection. Next slide, please. So the PCR rate was achieved in 17 patients. Squamous cell carcinoma achieved a high PCR rate compared to the adenocarcinoma. Next slide, please. And since all patients tolerate the treatment, none of the patients experienced grade 4 toxicity. Majority of the toxicity were grade 2 toxicity. So at a median follow-up of 12 months, 38 patients were alive, 6 patients were died. Next slide, please. See, among the death, 1 is due to cancer, rest is due to other.
1 minute left, Dr. Tintu.
Next slide, please. Among the recurrence, 4 recurrence, among the 7 recurrence, 4 were distant recurrence, 2 were local and 1 combined. Next slide, please. So majority of the recurrence were distant recurrence and overall recurrence rate was 14.59%. Next slide, please. So among the distant ones, 2 were liver, 1 belonged to lung. Next slide, please. So conclusion, our study showed a favorable PCR rate after preoperative chemotherapy. High PCR rate was seen in squamous cell carcinoma than adenocarcinoma. Distant recurrence were observed in majority of the patients. Next slide, please. So few limitations of this study. Few patients only treated with the LINAC. Short median duration of follow-up makeup. Any interpretation of recurrence and survival premature. However, this study provides important insight into the pathological response and recurrence pattern, which are indirect predictors of overall survival. Thank you.
I have a question, Dr. Tintu. What about the post-operative toxicities, or say wound difficulty in wound healing or etc.? You have not told us anything about that.
Yes, ma'am. None of the patients experienced post-operative mortality, but post-operative morbidity was there. Yes, ma'am.
Can you elaborate on the post-operative morbidity?
5 patients experienced pneumonia, and there are 2 patients there was pleural effusion was there, ma'am. And wound healing delay, actually, there was no significant wound delay, ma'am. All the patients are able to, we are able to treat the treatment in 6 weeks, ma'am.
What were your field placements in the cobalt?
Yes, ma'am.
When you use cobalt, what were the field placements?
APPA, ma'am. All the patients are treated with APPA.
Though I know your numbers are not adequate in LINAC arm, but did you find any difference in the surgical morbidity, morbidity rates between LINAC and cobalt, considering your dose was low? Yeah.
Actually, we didn't observe any difference, ma'am, actually.
Yes, your dose is only 41, so there will be less. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your CR rate is on higher side in 34%. How do you explain that?
Because only sample size is lesser actually. Maybe that may be the reason, but in cross trial and all, the PCR rate was only 28% they are observed because of this less sample size, and most of the patients are belong to squamous cell carcinoma histology. Squamous cell carcinoma have a higher response rate compared to the adenocarcinoma. That may be the reason.
Yours is a retrospective study, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So you must have picked up only the good ones.
Thank you, judges. We now proceed to the next presentation, number 16, 16, Dr. Adhar Amrit.
Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Amrit, go ahead.
Good evening, judges and my dear co-participants. Today, I am Dr. Adhar Amrit, junior resident from AIIMS Bhubaneswar, presenting a study on dosimetry comparison of 3D CRT versus IMRT versus VMAT. Okay, coming to my introduction, post-mastectomy radiation in left-sided breast cancer in women continues to pose a significant risk to the underlying lungs and heart. In developing countries like India, locally advanced breast cancer constitutes a significant part of the patient load. This makes radiotherapy an important tool in adjuvant therapy. The study was done with an intent to try to increase the planning tumor volume coverage and reduce dose to the organ matrix, which is a lung and a heart, by using 3 different planning methods for the same patient. Next slide. Now coming to the material and method, 35 left-sided breast cancer patients post-mastectomy were included in the study, and 3 different plans for adjuvant radiation were created using 3D CRT, IMRT, and VMAT. The prescribed dose was 50 gray in 25 fractions. The plans were compared with PTV 95%, homogeneity index, conformity index, hotspot, left lung V20, mean lung dose, heart V25, mean heart dose, and integral dose to the body. We performed Kruskal-Wallis ANOVA followed by pairwise T test to establish a hierarchy in terms of plan quality and dosimetric benefits. Next slide, please. Now coming to the results, we found that both VMAT and IMRT led to improved PTV coverage, 95% and 93% compared to 81% in 3D CRT arm. There is improved conformity index, 0.91 versus and 0.96 in IMRT and VMAT compared to 0.66 in 3D-CRT arm, which is statistically significant on pairwise analysis. The difference in homogeneity index and the reduction in hotspot was not statistically significant in all pairwise analysis. Now, the left lung V20 was statistically significant different between the three arms, with the highest values in the IMRT arm, followed by 3D-CRT, and the least value in the VMAT arm. Next slide, please. The mean lung dose was also statistically significantly different between the three arms. Now, there was statistically significant difference in mean heart dose between the three arms and on pairwise analysis. Now, both the inverse planning methods led to statistically significant increase in the low dose volume, which is assessed by V5 and V10 of the left lung, right lung, and heart. Now, coming to the integral dose to the body, which outside the PTV was also significantly increased in all pairwise analysis except between IMRT and VMAT. Next slide, please. Now, this is a table which is showing all the results. I've circled all the values which are statistically significant, and you can see all pairwise analysis are statistically significant except the homogeneity index between IMRT and VMAT and the integral dose between IMRT and VMAT as well. The rest all pairwise analysis were statistically significant. Next slide, please. Now, this is the comparison of the various plan based upon the chest wall irradiation, nodal irradiation, and the dose volume histograms. Now, we can see clearly that IMRT and VMAT lead to more conformal distribution of the dose as compared to the 3D-CRT, which is showing lateral distribution, and also that IMRT and VMAT cater to the depth of the axillary nodal region in as compared to 3D-CRT, and the dose volume histograms also show that it's better. Next slide, please. Now, to conclude, I would say both the inverse planning modalities, which was IMRT and VMAT, led to increased coverage.
1 minute left, doctor.
Better conformity index and better homogeneity index. Also decreased high dose volumes in all the ORs, which are the lung, both the lungs and the heart. Now, there was increased low volume irradiation of heart, both left and right lung and body. With my final conclusion is VMAT fared better than IMRT in coverage and decreasing lung irradiation with comparable heart irradiation between IMRT and VMAT. Thank you. Any questions?
The floor is open for discussion.
How did you actually treat the patients? You have for every patient, you have 3 plans. How were the patients treated?
Ma'am, we treated the plans by 3D-CRT. All patients
was treated by 3D-CRT.
Yes, ma'am.
This was only an academic exercise.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we have initiated this exercise, and following this, we have initiated deep inspiratory breath hold to assess the inclusion of IMRT and VMAT into clinical practice as well. We did not want to have a geographical miss, so we treated all patients by 3D-CRT, ma'am.
What's the point then? You say VMAT is the best and then you treat by 3D-CRT?
Ma'am.
Any other questions? All right. We now move to the next presentation. Number 17, 17, Dr. Bitan Pramrik.
Can I start? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Bitan Pramanik, JR3 from Ruby General Hospital, Kolkata. So today I'll be presenting this observational study where we have seen the changes in breast cosmesis, toxicities, and the dosimetric variables in adjuvant hyperfractionated whole breast irradiation. Next slide. So as I said, our purpose in the study was to assess the change in breast cosmesis, acute skin toxicities, late skin toxicity, late superficial strip toxicity at different points of time in breast carcinoma patients receiving adjuvant hyperfractionated whole breast radiotherapy after BCS surgery, and also assess any existing relationship with any of the dosimetric variables responsible for the outcome of changes. Next slide, please. So we included 125 patients in our study. We have followed the Starbuck protocol for irradiation, that is 40 gray in 15 fractions at the rate of 2.67 gray per fraction over a period of 3 weeks. We have used the Harvard Cosmesis Gradient Scale for assessing the cosmesis and the RTOG scales for assessing the acute and late toxicities. Here is a pictorial example of the Harvard Cosmesis Grading Scale, A depicting excellent cosmesis, B depicting good cosmesis, C depicting a fair cosmesis, and D depicting a poor cosmesis. This pictorial example has been taken from a similar study done by Siamela et al. Next slide, please. So after all the CT simulations and the contouring and the planning was done, we have generated separate isodose volumes for 95% 102%, 105%, and 107%. And further, we are subdivided into within the PTV and outside the PTV. Here in the red and the violet and the orange and the yellow, you can see 105%, 102% within and outside the PTVs. Point to be noted, we have done the plans with 3D CRT with field-in-field technique. Next slide, please. So how did we analyze our data? We used SPSS software, and first we did a multivariate analysis of all the clinical outcomes and the dosimetric variables for ascertaining significant associations. Furthermore, we did correlation tests between the variables, and also we ran the logistic regression analysis test for predicting outcomes of interest with the different variables. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is the table of the multivariate analysis showing the different clinical outcomes and the different dosimetric variables. Acute skin toxicity had a significant association with 95% outside the PTV volume and 105% outside the PTV volume. Late toxicities had a significant association with 102% outside the PTV volume and 105% outside the PTV volume. And cosmetic changes has a significant association with 102% within the PTV volume, 105%, 107% within the PTV volume, and 102% outside the PTV volume. Next slide, please. Here we can see the correlation test and the predictive probabilities. For acute skin toxicity, 95% within the PTV volume, 102% within the PTV volume, and 95% out of the PTV volume had a significant correlation. And also 102% outside the PTV volume had significant predictive probability of developing acute skin toxicity. Similarly, 105% within PTV volume for late skin toxicity, and 102% outside the PTV volume, 105% within the PTV volume for late subcutaneous toxicity. And for changes in breast cosmesis, we 95% and 102% within the PTV volume had significant predictive probability. So next slide, please.
Dr. Beaton, 1 minute left.
Yeah. So those again have a significant impact on the toxicity and cosmetic outcome. 105% prescribed dose was found to be a significant factor for development of late toxicities. 102% isodose volume outside the PTV should be kept at a minimum, as it has significant association with both cosmesis and toxicities. Every effort should be made not to generate 107% volume even within the PTV. In our study, we have found that newer variables like excess dose above the prescribed dose received by tissue outside the PTV also needs to be looked into as suggested in our findings. Thank you so much. Next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Beaton. The floor is open for discussion. Any questions from the judges? If there are no questions, we'll proceed to the next presentation. Number 18, 1-8, Dr. Vasundhara Chand. Dr. Vasundhara, are you there?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. A very good evening to the respectful judges. Today I am presenting a case report with the title Ulceroproliferative Cutaneous Metastasis, a rare and ambiguous presentation in a breast cancer patient. Next slide. Next slide, please. Worldwide, breast cancer is the most frequently diagnosed cancer and leading cause of cancer death among females. Bone is the most common site of metastasis in breast, followed by lung and brain. Though the incidence of cutaneous metastasis in breast carcinoma is 23.9%, but it has got varied presentation ranging from papillary nodular lesions to erysipeloid form, but there is no well-established classification which includes them all. Next slide, please. Next slide. Herein we are discussing clinico-pathological features and treatment of 42-year-old lady who was a treated case of carcinoma right breast presenting with distant cutaneous metastasis without any visceral metastasis. Next slide. So a 42-year-old female treated case of infiltrating ductal carcinoma right breast, clinically stage 3B, presented with complaint of painful ulcerated growth on inner aspect of right arm and right-sided chest wall 6 months post completion of treatment. Initially, she was a TNBC carcinoma right breast patient with infiltrating ductal carcinoma grade 2 histology. She received cyclophosphamide-based NACT followed by right-sided MRM and axillary lymph node dissection, which was followed by completion chemotherapy. Then she received RT to the right chest wall and SCF to a dose of 40 grain 15 fraction at the rate of 2.67 gray per fraction on LA by 3D CRT. The patient completed the whole treatment and then she was lost to follow for 6 months after completion of treatment. Patient gave history of persistence of skin lesion while she was on medication for dermatitis, which later on progressed to maculopapular vesicles, for which she took some local treatment. As the lesion progressed to ulceroproliferative growth with severe pain and bleeding, she came back to a cancer center. A biopsy was done from the growth and HPR showed islands of infiltrating ductal carcinoma, malignant cells breaching skin epithelium. Other metastatic workup was normal. Patient was offered pain medication as was counseled for wound care, followed by referral to medical oncology department for evaluation of palliative chemotherapy. Next slide. Next slide, please. So this is the picture depicting the growth on the right arm and the inner aspect of chest wall and back. Next slide. Next slide. This is the HPR showing the infiltrating ductal carcinoma cell breaching skin epithelium. Next slide. So skin is an uncommon site for distant metastasis and internal malignancy, which when discovered usually indicate disseminated disease. A patient was having wide spectrum of clinical features, which started from itching and hyperpigmentation in the involved site and progressed to ulceroproliferative growth with papilla nodules. In a series of 164 cases of skin metastasis, the most common presentation was papilla and nodule forms, and the least common presentation was steriliform form. As there is no well-established classification system of cutaneous metastasis, which includes them all, the terminology of this clinical variant is not well defined. These often mimic dermatitis-like situation with either zoster-form or erysipelas presentation and so often get misdiagnosed. Prompt recognition of skin metastasis by treating oncologists allows for earlier intervention and treatment. Next slide. Next slide. What is peculiar about a patient was presence of cutaneous metastasis without any signs of visceral metastasis, and the probable reason may be the extensive network of breast lymphatics to such a form of presentation. Other local treatment modalities like using topical 6% miltefosine for 12 weeks, use of cryotherapy in combination with either topical 5-fluorouracil 5% or topical imiquimod showed striking response. Wide local excision can be another option. Radiotherapy can be used to control local skin mets, but it may not be considered an option in previously irradiated areas. Next slide. Next slide. So in conclusion, cutaneous metastatic carcinoma of breast often remains a topic of ambiguity due to its varied clinical presentation and rarity, which remains a challenge to diagnose and treat for the oncologist. Its basic pathology, morphological classification, and treatment options. Yes. Its basic pathology, morphological classification, and treatment options are still needed to be investigated further for quick diagnosis and treatment of metastatic breast carcinoma patients. Next slide. Thank you.
I request the judges to begin the question.
In this case, did you do a repeat biopsy from the site of recurrence?
Yes, sir.
And what was the molecular profile?
So we did not perform the IHC, but we did biopsy when patient presented to us 6 months after the completion of the treatment, and biopsy showed, like I have seen, given a picture of HPR where there were these infiltrating ductal carcinoma cells into the skin epithelium.
But you could have done a repeat biopsy and molecular profile to see whether it has transformed into another type.
Yes.
Who did the surgery, in your center or elsewhere?
So, ma'am, in our center only.
Is it possible to focus the clinical picture once more?
Yes.
Where you are the lady, you're showing the lady with all the skin involvement.
So can you please go back to the slides?
रविंद्र please slide दिखा दो फिर से. Last slides जो जिसमें skin वाली होती है चित्र ये.
Photo, the photo of the patient.
Yeah, this is the one.
This is the one.
Wait, this one.
This is widespread dermal infiltration. It's not an isolated cutaneous thing. We would be interested in the findings, the operative findings, what were the pathology, and I'm not sure whether there was implantation of tumor tissues on the skin at the time of surgery.
Yes, ma'am, it can be a probable reason because at the, like when
my
the
money
patient...
would be on that.
Sorry, ma'am?
I said, my guess is that this is actually implantation of tumors during the surgery on the skin flap, which has spread through the dermal lymphatics. This is not an isolated skin metastasis. It is in the same area where the primary tumor was, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Where it has been operated. Anyway, it's your version versus my version, so that is not the question. Just wanted to keep that in mind. Okay, thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
What is the follow-up?
Sorry, sir.
What happened to the patient?
Ma'am, we referred the patient to medical oncology department, and I followed up the patient there. She received 3 cycles of taxane, 21-day cycle, and after 3 cycles, she again went lost to follow up. I did try calling her, but her number was not reachable. Ma'am, initially she was also like she defaulted for follow up 6 months. So after then, I was not able to follow up her. Like I followed up her for 3 cycles of palliative chemotherapy only.
Thank you, judges. Thank you, Dr. Vasundhara. We now move to the number 19, 19, Dr. Debanjan Kundu.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Debanjan, go ahead.
Good afternoon, my respected teachers, colleagues, and thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Today, I am going to present my study on multiple primary malignant neoplasms, or MPMN, a single institutional audit from Eastern India. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
MPMN was first defined and properly documented by Bill Roth as per Becker's 1869 as clinically and histologically distinct neoplasms in the same patient due to many factors, especially ever-increasing number of cancer and improving survival. MPMN cases are also increasing rapidly worldwide, with prevalence as much as 17% being reported in some populations. A few studies in India have documented MPMN, but no robust one has been reported from the eastern region of India yet. Considering the available literature, there is deficient data on intention of treatment offered and patient survival, among others. Next, please. Next, please. Our objective was to delineate the demographic parameters, tumor characteristics, and outcome measures in patients with MPMN. Next, please. Ours was a retrospective audit in a tertiary care hospital. We divided the sample of 70 into 2 cohorts of synchronous and metachronous malignancy, depending on whether the time interval between diagnosis was less or more than 6 months. Apart from the demographic parameters, we also observed site of tumor, stage at presentation, treatment offered, overall survival. Next, please. Regarding demographics, in synchronous cohort, the median time interval between 2 diagnoses was 3 days. And in metachronous cohort, it was found to be 4 years. Family history of cancer was twice as common in the synchronous cohort than the metachronous. Metachronous neoplasms presented as late as 5 years in 39% of patients, indicating the need of continuous surveillance. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. In the synchronous cohort, we found some patients with CA breast, and CA ovary, CA endometrium combination with significant positive family history, pointing us towards a possible genetic predisposition. Both the study cohorts reported similar profile for most common malignancies, namely breast, head and neck, and lung cancer. Next, please. Regarding treatment offered, 50% patients in the synchronous cohort underwent upfront palliative treatment. In the metachronous cohort, all cases for the first primary and 70% cases for the second primary received curative treatment. Next, please. For overall survival, the Kaplan-Meier curve shows a good separation right from the start, with the synchronous cohort reporting a dismal median OS of 45 months compared to 125 months in the metachronous, which is statistically significant. This may be attributed to 79% of such patients in the synchronous cohort presenting in an advanced stage compared to 53% in the metachronous. Next, please. When compared to available studies from different corners of our country, our study reported comparable findings along most of the study parameters. Next, please. To infer effective screening and stringent surveillance system should be in place to diagnose MPMN at an earlier stage to provide a cost-effective management and get an improved prognosis for the patients. Unmet need of robust data should be met by monitoring of clinico-demographic parameters over a longer follow-up period, especially in the Indian scenario. Next, please. Our study was just published in an international journal a few months back, and these are my acknowledgements. Next, please. Thank you for listening. If there are any questions, Chairman.
The floor is open for discussion.
technically speaking, you are not supposed to present as a paper something that has already been published.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for the insight.
Any other questions? All right. So we've come to the conclusion. I would like to request the judges to share their views and general opinions regarding this best paper session. So do the judges have any general opinions and how are their views regarding this session?
Please make request one by one to them.
All right. So first, I'd like to request Dr. Sushmita ma'am to give her opinion regarding this session.
Can I be frank or do I have to be politically correct?
Very frank, ma'am.
Okay, fine.
As usually you are.
And you can't beat me. I am virtual.
I will never try, ma'am.
Anyway, no, jokes apart, I find there are 5 case reports which at the national, I mean, since you have been taking people from outside, in my opinion, in a best paper session, case reports are not to be presented, unless, of course, it is absolutely in the local version of your thing. Now, that's anyway, I'm nobody to judge other people's judgment. And as I mentioned, the last paper, which I thought was good, but if it has already been published, they had no business to present it here. Having said that, I was quite impressed by the way the students spoke, since they are, I presume all of them were students, or at least most of them were. So I was very much impressed by the way they spoke, their language, the confidence, and sometimes the overconfidence. But anyway, however, as these were from students, I was not expecting any rocket science from these people. But except the last one, most of them were very mundane. But anyway, still it's in this pandemic and the things that we have gone into a lull, I congratulate the organizers for at least stimulating so much academic activity. And I thank you all for having me here. I'm sorry if I've hurt anybody.
Thank you, ma'am, for those valuable suggestions and opinion. I now invite Dr. Kishore Singh to share his opinion as well.
Most of these papers has already been submitted in JCRT for publication. So I have already gone through most of them. The slides are a little bit cramped. There should not be much of the too much of material in one slide. And they should focus more on what they are doing rather than reciting the literature and all other things, especially the references. They should not be the part of the presentation. Overall, it's much better than what I expected, and most of them are good.
Duly noted. I'm sure the students will improve on their presentations next time regarding that. Next, I invite Dr. C.S. Madhu to give his opinion.
So first of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers for doing this best paper session. It is definitely a stimulus for young oncologists to come out with their work and present. Some of these were original works and therefore interesting. But as Dr. Sushmita pointed out, case reports and then already published retrospective analysis. Anyway, whatever it be, most of them spoke well. So there is a future for radiation oncology in India. Congrats to organizers once again.
Thank you, sir, for those comments. And